Read our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Perth County is situated on the traditional land of the Onondaga Bay, who have a long-standing relationship with the land and water throughout the region. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous, Metis, and Inuit people who call this territory home. As a county, we have a responsibility for reconciliation and the continued stewardship of the land on which we live and work. If you have pecuniary interest, you can disclose that now or as the meeting goes along. After history, language, we'll move on to confirmation of the agenda. Tyler has a amendment to make.
Yeah, so through the ordinance, we have one addition under 7.1, it'd be a delegation on item 8.1.1, Punky Doodle's Corners, and that is John Bailey.
And are we removing?
And we will be removing item 8.2.2, 2022 audited consolidated financial statements. Removing?
Removing. Okay, so we have a motion that December 21, 2023 agenda be approved as amended. Moved by Councillor Orr, second by Councillor Smith. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, so we do have our consent agenda minutes. We only have one item. Wow. One consent agenda item, and that's our minutes from our last meeting. Do we have any questions or comments on those minutes? If not, then council receives and approves the December 7, 2023 council minutes. Moved by Councillor Kassenberg, second by Councillor Aitchison. All those in favor? Carried. We have a delegation this morning, and we have Mr. John Bailey with us. So Mr. Bailey, if you'd like to come up to the chairs there.
Ed and I.
Okay, you want to bring Ed Dana with you? That's fine. Morning, gentlemen. Welcome.
Morning. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Ed and I are here representing Punky Doodles Community Association, which is approximately 30 families so far. We've had more interest, but we've tried to limit it to that. We are in the building that is home base to EMS here in Perth County. The incredible people that leap into action when there's another awful collision at places like Punky Doodles Corners. We are here again to speak to the issue before you today with respect to the intersection control feasibility study and intersection improvements at Punky Doodles Corners. Our number one concern here is public safety. We've seen enough trauma in our community, and we want everyone who travels through these corners to make it home alive. And that should be your concern as well. It's very likely that many of the discussions here at Council center around the subject of increased population growth in towns and cities, and Perth County has identified that at least 3,000 acres of productive farmland will be lost to development over the next number of years. The province has put an enormous amount of pressure on every municipality to fast-track development by any means possible, expanding urban boundaries, minister zoning orders, rezoning greenbelt land, whatever it takes. Although the provincial average may have historically been around 2% growth, the projections you're seeing in recent reports are much higher. This, according to StatsCan. Canada's population was estimated at 40,528,396 on October 1st of 2023. That's an increase of 430,635 people, a 1.1% growth from July 1st. This is the highest population growth in any quarter since the second quarter of 1957, which was 1.2% per quarter when Canada's population grew by 198,000 people. By contrast, Punky Doodles Corners has not grown, but suffers from all of the effects of growth from the surrounding communities. When you look at the intensity of traffic in the community, the reality is, aside from future growth, we have a problem now. In their staff report, Oxford County and R.C. Spencer Associates refers to these older historical growth rates in justifying the design and recommendations for what is warranted for this area. But it's clear that already, since their study last summer, it's wildly out of date. The collision statistics that you see in the staff report are also grossly underreported, and by the end of 2023, you will see an alarming increase, and it's getting worse. We had regular collisions over the summer, and over a period of 6 weeks' time this fall, we had an average of 1 collision every week. In the report from R.C. Spencer Associates, they provided you with 3 different design orientations for a roundabout at Punky Doodle's Corners. Each design has different strengths and advantages, and further refinements can be made. Here in Perth, you've heard a number of delegations speaking to the myriad issues with respect to the traffic safety at the corners, the dangers of bringing all of the traffic to a T intersection on the high-speed curve, the potential danger facing operators of farm equipment getting out of the proposed intersection and out of harm's way. We're essentially funneling all of the collisions from the 5 intersections into one place. You've not heard a single delegation in support of this proposal. The potential for high-speed collisions will continue to have long-term psychological and emotional impacts on the surrounding community. When collisions happen, and they will, there is a much higher potential for fatalities. A roundabout, on the other hand, by design, forces drivers to slow down, requires no maintenance for complex signaling, and minimizes the need for enforcement. What would you rather send to Punky Doodle's Corners? A tow truck or an air ambulance? Wilmot Township Council heard these concerns on December 11th and agreed that they should defer the decision on the proposal to take a deeper look at roundabout options, and that speed limits should indeed be reduced. Almost every municipality is facing inflationary budget shortfalls, having to slash budgets, and having to deliver significant tax increases to voters. If you knew you were going to build a roundabout, would you still spend $333,000 on Perth's share of this $1 million short-term solution? Or would you instead pass a bylaw to reduce speeds to 60 kilometers per hour in the interim and immediately start the design and engineering process for a roundabout? If we go ahead with this short-term solution, we need your assurance and commitment today that the design and engineering process will begin right away. The property owners on all 4 corners have expressed their motivation to make a solution happen as soon as possible. None of them have been contacted. Please reach out to them. Our community association has met many times over the last year, and on October the 2nd, voted unanimously on 2 things. Number 1, speed reductions to 60 kilometers per hour in all 3 directions. Number 2, that a roundabout is the best option. If cost is truly the driver here, why are we not tapping into provincial or federal funding for this project? No more Band-Aids on top of Band-Aids. It's abundantly clear to everyone in our community that if this short-term improvement gets implemented, the reality is that the second phase of this project goes to the very bottom of the priority list in every county. We need a documented commitment that if Perth County approves the budget spend for this project, we have a motion today that commits the county to phase 2 of this project. If not, we're asking that you do the following. Number 1, make a motion today to reduce the speed limits in all 3 directions to 60 kilometers per hour. And number 2, make a motion today to commit to one of the roundabout options proposed by the consultants. Let's do this the right way. And Ed and I would welcome any questions and comments.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from members of council? Councilor
Yes.
McDermott?
Yeah, when you talk about the 3 directions, which 3 directions are you talking about?
Well, the 3 main arterial roads that feed the corners, southbound from Road 101, coming from Highway 7 and 8.
Yeah.
Eastbound coming from Tavistock, and northbound coming from Oxford Road 5. The smaller road, which is Punky Doodle's Ave, is really not the concern. And because there's the hamlet there, the small community, that sort of forces traffic to a lower speed. So that's not really a concern. It's the 3 main arterial roads that come into the corners. Yeah.
Okay, other questions? Counselor Orr?
Just want to clarify, what happened at Wilmot Township? I was under the impression they had passed.
So they, I was the one who presented there. They passed, they were in support of the short-term recommendation, but they're also very much in support of doing motions to the county, the region, and to the others of reducing speed limits and
Phase 2.
and phase 2 for the roundabout design. And they are also in the process of trying to upload their portion to Waterloo Region, just for your information. So the short piece of 101A and County Road 5 are actually, like County Road 5 is Oxford and Wilmot, which is kind of an inconsistent for design processes. It should be Oxford, Waterloo, so that we end up with a county level engineering on all pieces.
Okay, other questions? No, okay, thank you, gentlemen, very much for coming.
Thank you for having us.
We have a motion that council receives delegation item 7.1 on item 8.1.1, Punky Doodle Corner, John Bailey and Ed Danon, moved by Councillor Pinkowski, second by Councillor McDermott. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, now we're going to move to our reports, and the first one is Public Works, and it's 8.1.1, and it's a Punky Doodle Corner. John is going to join us, and Bill. And we do have our consultant is with us this morning as well, and it's Mr. Aaron Blatt. Aaron's going to come up on the screen. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Warden Nuggets. Good morning, Council. We're here again today to present the report, Doodles Corner Intersection Control Feasibility Study and Intersection Improvements. This is the same report that you received at the last council meeting. And with us today virtually is Mr. Aaron Blatta from R.C. Spencer Associates, the consultant who undertook the study and authored the report and recommendations. Aaron is here to answer any questions council may have with the technical merits of the study and recommended improvements. I'll just speak briefly to the report here. A roundabout is not warranted under current conditions or when projecting traffic volumes 20 years into the future. If a roundabout was warranted, we'd be making those recommendations to you today. It's also fair to say that if a roundabout was warranted 5 to 10 years down the road, we would be making those same recommendations to you as well. What is warranted at Punky Doodles Corner is a left turn lane on Perth Road 101. Staff recommend that the left-hand turn lane, along with the other improvements outlined in the report, are approved by council so that detailed design can move forward in order to construct in 2024. The improvements outlined in the report are designed to improve traffic operations, improve sight lines, turning movements, and overall safety. The improvements aren't just short-term, but a sustainable solution that can address increased traffic volumes in the foreseeable future. If approved and constructed, the improvements at Punky Doodles will be monitored to ensure operational effectiveness, and the consultant's report also recommends that analysis be performed every 5 years as part of an ongoing monitoring. Oxford County and Wilmot Township councils have approved resolutions to move forward with the improvements outlined in the report. Both councils did add resolutions pertaining to monitoring and further improvements. And in keeping with that, council could consider an additional resolution that would direct staff for the ongoing monitoring of traffic operations at Punky Doodles Corner and explore further refinements and improvements with Oxford County and Wilmot Township / the Regional Waterloo. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thanks, John. Questions of the report? McDermott?
Yeah, for Aaron, through the mayor. When you're designing roundabouts and stuff like that, is it taken into consideration, like heavy transport trucks? Because I know talking to truckers, they absolutely hate these things. They never want to see them. So is that taken into consideration?
Through you, Warden. The reality is that, I mean, if you're following the standards, you should be considering the design with respect to traffic as it relates to the design vehicle. And so if there's a significant portion of that traffic that are trucks, you should be designed to accommodate that. With respect to the designs that we provided, they do in fact accommodate the larger transport trucks. Typically what you would see in a roundabout is that what's called a truck apron. It's in the middle. It's a semi-mountable area where trucks can mount over and make their turns that require a little bit of a larger sweep, while passenger vehicles would stay on the typical asphalt area.
Okay. Councillor Katzenberg?
So earlier in the delegation that presented this morning, there was some suggestion that there has been a gross underreporting of collision data in the staff report. Can I ask staff to just comment on that suggestion that has been made?
Through you, Warden Eggetts, I'll maybe ask Aaron to comment more on that, but a thorough investigation into the accidents and the reported accidents at that location were undertaken as part of this study. It was one of the first parts that we did. And so that resulted in in gaining information from both the Regional Waterloo Police, Oxford OPP, and Perth County OPP. And Aaron, if you have any further comments to that, please add that.
Yeah. Through you, Warden. The reality is that we did not include anything from 2023 because the reports take a while to actually be produced. And as far as the comment about things that have happened since the authoring of the report, the reality is we can't include reports that we don't have access to. So all the reports that were considered within the context of the collision evaluation and the reporting done on that was based off of the comprehensive evaluation. And trust me when I tell you, it was meticulous trying to gather information from all the respective road authorities and all the respective policing authorities to ensure that we had all the reports that were available on hand. Now, again, those probably do not consider any, I would say, fender benders or anything like that. If the police doesn't show up, it doesn't show up as a report. So unfortunately, we can only work with the data that's provided to us, and what was presented in the context of the report and at the PIC is what was presented to us.
Okay.
Just supplemental. Sometimes, of course, we have access to anecdotal information. Certainly the suggestion from the delegates is that this year has seen some sort of uptick. That's my impression. Does staff have any insight into this? Even anecdotally, has there been an uptick in accidents at Monkey Doodle's Corners?
Through the Warden, again, we don't necessarily have those reports from the policing authorities as yet. And as Mr. Blatt has said, that's why we haven't taken into account accidents that have occurred in 2023. We're not aware of an uptick in accidents at that location.
Okay,
Go
ahead.
Through you, Warden, I just want to add maybe that within the context of the study, we also did take a look at if there were any typical types of collisions that could be mitigated through improvements, and there was nothing that really stood out. They were all a variety of run off the road, rear end, head-on type collisions. So there wasn't anything that in particular could be mitigated, which tells you that there isn't one particular issue. It's just it's an area where drivers unfortunately don't take the caution that's required, and they may be having collisions. That being said, if we're just looking at, and this came up at the Township of Wilmot council meeting, when it comes to the actual number of collisions that are required to satisfy the warrant for signalization, which is in effect the warrant that is considered for implementation of a roundabout, it requires 15 collisions over the course of 36 months, which is 3 years. And we didn't see that any of the nodes that we studied. And really the one that stood out the most was really intersection 1, which is the intersection of Punky Doodles Avenue at OR5. And for that reason, we recommended that we need to close that continuation of Perth Oxford Road right away, because it is causing a bit of uncertainty and is resulting in some collisions, and unfortunately did also result in a fatality. And so we want to do away with that right of way, convert that to a T intersection where the minor street yields the right of way to the through traffic, and similarly on the bend, consolidate all access to a single point where the only drivers that can make a quote unquote mistake are the ones that would be heading northbound and looking for a gap in traffic. Otherwise, it's basically a free flow operation.
I think my last question, which was provoked at our last council meeting, was the interesting presentation from Dr. Peter Ottenreed. And he had gone through the effort and acknowledged that he's not a traffic consultant or expert, but went through the effort to try to propose some alternatives in that area. I just want some comfort or reassurance that Dr. Ottenreed's plan, his diagrams and ideas for clearing up some of the things in that area have been considered at some point in the project.
Through the warden, I'll direct that to.
Yes, through you, Warden. So as it relates to a response to Dr. Ottenreed, the County of Oxford reached out to me to provide a response that they then turned over to Dr. Ottenreed. And trust me, it was comprehensive. It addressed all of the items that he had put forward, specifically as it relates to basically suggesting that all of the traffic should go into the intersection that exhibited the most number of collisions. I felt that was a little unfortunate that it wasn't discussed, but as far as some of the other elements that are utility considerations, based on the number of left turns that would be needed to be accommodated within the peak hour, you would probably need a dedicated left turn phase in accordance with the MTO standard, which basically has a threshold of 300 vehicles per hour per lane for implementation of a double left turn lane that is protected. Then if we go further into the discussions, I do actually have a graphic. I don't know if you'd like for me to show it, I can show it, but I basically identified that you're actually worse off with a 4-legged intersection than you are from compared to a 3-legged intersection with respect to the number of conflict points. And let me just see if this will work. Maybe I can pull it up. I am overseas in Europe right now, so I can't make any promises, but let's see if this goes. Okay. Can you see what I'm showing you?
Yes, we can.
All right, so this graphic here, the one up at the top identifies the number of conflict points that are generated at a 4-legged intersection, and the different colors there with the diverging, merging, and crossing are identified accordingly. And you can see, if you count it up, you get to 32 potential conflict points. And at a T intersection, which is what we're proposing at that intersection number 1, that's actually narrowed down to a total of only 8. So you can see just from a first principle perspective, what we're proposing is a much safer option than what is currently out there.
Okay, Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, through you, Warden. I guess this is a question for the consultant. Would reducing the speed limit to 60 through that curve have any effect on the amount of collisions with your design?
Through you, Warden. As it relates to speed, and I think we identified this in the context of our report, we typically refer to the TAC guideline on setting speed limits because you want your speed limit to be relatively close to the 85th percentile of what motorists are driving. And that just means that if you line up all the traffic speeds one next to the other, and you kind of go to the 85% portion of that line, that kind of represents the safe speed at which drivers, deem the operations to be suitable for their environment. And so within the context of what we're trying to propose here, we also want to make sure that we're not proposing a speed limit that motorists do not obey. And if they do not obey it, unfortunately, then you get a greater differential in the speeds. Those that are traveling, as we had identified, some greater than 105 kilometers an hour, upwards of 120 kilometers an hour. Not a lot, but a few. And then if you get those that are traveling at the posted speed limit being 60 kilometers an hour, you can see why the 60-kilometer-an-hour differential may be concerning from our perspective as it relates to the safety at the curve. That said, you as a road authority, you're not obligated to reflect upon what the TAC guidelines identify. Those are merely guidelines. You as a road authority can set it to be 40 kilometers an hour if you wish. The problem is that if you are implementing speed limits that are not intuitive, and if you're implementing speed limits that are disrespected, you will see that disrespect carry across the rest of the county, unfortunately. So this is why we want to be mindful about how we set the speed limits, that they do in fact match the environment and that motorists pay attention to those environments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Deputy Warden Kellum?
Yes, through the warden, and to build on Councillor Duncan's comments, I'm looking at slide 27 here, John, and it kind of looks similar to the design that is up at 7 and 8 with the left-hand turn and the right-hand turn, excluding the stoplights, and the speed limit there is 80 kilometers, if I'm not.
Through the warden and further to Councillor Kellum's question, what this design or these improvements may look like, what you may be see elsewhere in Perth County is west of Moncton at Highway 23 and Perth Line 55. Very similar situation where in the past there was a road allowance that went directly west, which was closed off. Perth Line 55 was then realigned to be more of a 90-degree angle coming into Highway 23. And then there are left-hand and right-hand turn lanes there to facilitate turning movements off of Highway 23. So
Speed limits of 80.
Speed limits of 80, correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McDermott?
Yesterday at 11:30, I went out to, I've been to that area many times, but I went back out to simply refresh my memory and stuff like that. What is it? I think you call it intersection 1, that's Oxford 24 and Oxford Road 5. Is that the main intersection where all the accidents, most of the accidents happen? Like, is that the main problem area?
Through the warden, the majority of accidents occurred at Oxford Road 5 and Punky Doodles Ave and Perth Oxford Road and 101A. Yes, that particular intersection 1 is identified in the report.
Just wanted to double check.
Okay, any more questions? Councillor Aitchison?
Just out of curiosity, like I agree with the consultant on the speed limit. I see that on my road. But you got some people going 60 and you got some going 120. It causes more bedlam than you want to imagine. So I guess my question is, when we've seen what the speed limits were to start with, like 110, 115, 120, and I think I mentioned at last meeting, maybe a lack of enforcement. Has any of the municipalities reached out to the policing services in that area to say, listen, we need some more enforcement in that area. We're not getting any. Has that ever happened, or?
Through the warden, I have reached out to Perth County OPP on numerous occasions regarding Punky Doodles Corner. That certainly has occurred over a number of years. So over the last 3 years, I've requested reports specific to Punky Doodles Corner and our overall road network from the OPP. And they've been very responsive in that. They are well aware. I did have a conversation with one of their head sergeants there about what the improvements that we were recommending at this location, and that continued enforcement would be imperative to assist with the ongoing improvements.
Okay, other questions?
I just have a quick follow-up.
Sure.
How many infractions were actually drivers charged with in that area? Because they'll have that information too. Do they release that?
Sorry, Councillor.
Infractions,
Infraction.
tickets laid, or tickets summons or whatever.
Through the warden, I don't have that data.
They may be trolling it, but I'll bet you there's very few infractions recorded. Like we had that problem on, because a lot of the traffic they get, I get on my road on a van, especially in the summertime. And we had maybe 1 or 2 charges laid when we had the OPP enforcing it, and then we switched police forces. Now we're getting like upwards of 80, 90 on that particular area. It's just, there's more enforcement to slow the traffic down. That's, like we were thinking there wasn't any charges laid, and when we got all the numbers, there weren't. If you're not gonna charge people, you're not gonna slow them down. Just a comment.
Okay, other questions? No questions? Okay, we do have a motion. We'll see where it goes. That council receives Punky Doodle Corners intersection control feasibility study and intersection improvement report, and that council endorse the recommended intersection improvements of Punky Doodle's Corners for implementation in 2024 as detailed in report, and that council pre-approve $330,000 as part of the 2024 capital budget to fund Perth County's portion of the proposed capital works at Punky Doodle's Corners. We have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Duncan.
I'd like to add to the motion.
Okay,
I was wondering if we can add something into the motion that that will continue to monitor traffic and traffic patterns at the intersection with an eye towards further improvements if the warrants necessitate those improvements.
Want to read out something?
sure.
So
You have a question?
No, just if I may,
Sure.
also through the warrant, so to Councillor Duncan's comment there, I would like to see us do this entire motion in its entirety the way it is, whether it's yea or nay. And then as per staff's suggestion, as you mentioned, have a separate motion to monitor. I don't know if that's,
Okay, I'd be
if that makes sense.
I'd be okay with that.
Okay, so let's go with the original motion first. We have a mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Trankowski. We have a seconder, Councillor Orr. Any more comments or questions? Councillor Katzenberg?
I continue to find myself troubled by the vehemence of those who live in the area about this particular. And I wasn't seeking applause, Warden, trust me, the fact that it seems so unpalatable to those who live there is of some concern to me, especially in the context of, and we've been assured that this is not the case, but should this not prove to be a long-term solution and we find ourselves revisiting this in 5 years or 6 years, we're going to feel a little bit silly about the actions that we've made today. So I just really struggle with this one, despite all the assurances of the expertise here, that we just don't seem to have the neighbors on side or on board with this. And I'm not sure that makes for a good investment.
Okay, anyone else? Councillor Orr?
If I could just comment there, I don't really want to delay this. I want to see improvements. I think that this is the measured approach of we are making an improvement that we have been strongly suggested by our people, our staff, and everyone involved, that is based on data. And if we make this improvement, to my understanding, it's not money wasted. I believe that it's just the first. We'll try this, we'll see how it works, and we'll look at it again. 5 years, as it warrants.
Okay, Councillor Trankowski?
Through you, Warden, thank you. I concur with Councillor Orr's comments. I am cognizant of the citizens' concerns. My own experience, having done work in Regional Waterloo, the roundabout experience there, It was fraught with its own problems when they introduced roundabouts in the region. The roundabouts that I've experienced on highway, gotta get the number right, between Stratford and St. Mary's, Highway 719. It's moved the conflict points away from the intersections, and it's translocated the conflict points between the roundabouts. I experienced that on my daily commute to and from my Upper Thames Conservation Authority meetings. I was almost involved in a serious accident in Barnholm in May of 2021. Mayor McKenzie will know this because he and I have talked about it a lot. That's half a mile from my house. I came within half a second of ending up in somebody's front yard with the truck and trailer in tow. And this week, another close call, this time at line 42 and Highway 23, where someone jumped the stop sign. So I get it, I understand it, but we've got to do something. And I agree, as Councillor Orr has suggested, we have to do something. So this is the first step, and we'll see where it goes from here. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? If not, all in favor of the motion?
So we're just voting on the original motion?
We're just voting on the original motion,
Okay.
yes. All in favor of the original motion? Carried. Okay, Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, so I'd like to add a second motion to this, that we continue to monitor traffic patterns and accidents at this intersection. And as soon as the warrants tell us that we need to further improvements, then I feel we, that as a county, we need to work with the other partners to make those improvements at that time.
Okay, are you seconding that?
No, I have a question.
I want a seconder before. Councillor Smith? Okay, questions?
So my question is, what is our definition of continuing to monitor? What kind of intensity or services need to be applied there for the purposes of that?
Who wants to answer that? How we monitor it? Like, is it weekly, monthly, yearly? Excuse me.
Through the ward now, maybe refer that to Mr. Blada to answer, but we would, obviously, we've got the speed radar signs out there now. That's a permanent installation. They are located at the exact location of where the speed studies were taken by R.C. Spencer Associates. So we are comparing apples to apples when we're looking at speeds with the ongoing monitoring. I would suggest that we're able to do that now, and we are doing that now as far as speed. And once these improvements are made, we likely won't know for about a year about how things are operating at that particular location. But it would be an annual monitoring, and then a 5-year, after every 5 years, we'd be doing further warrant studies just to ensure that traffic volumes and traffic patterns haven't changed significantly from what we projected. And Aaron, if you've had anything to add to that, it'd be appreciated.
Through you, Warden, I concur with John's assessment there. I think the reality is that you would evaluate it. I mean, you have the radar units up there now. They're giving you continuous feedback. That's very helpful. I think an annual review might be appropriate, but that would be more so just to evaluate the average annual daily traffic and what's being experienced out there and how that compares to the growth rates that were assumed. As we had indicated within the context of the report, we assumed a 2% growth rate compounded annually to a 20-year horizon, which effectively means that at the 20-year horizon, we expect approximately 50% more traffic than what we see out there now. And we did reference the absolute worst day of the year, which we were told was the May long weekend, as well as the weeks leading up to that point. So I think it would be appropriate to just, again, compare apples to apples, perhaps either annually or biannually, then to take a look at those long weekend type scenarios, whether it's the May long weekend or not. I don't know that it necessarily matters, but I think it would be helpful if you did make the arrangement that every whatever May long weekend, you'd have something to compare to, so that and then obviously share with the area residents to confirm that yes, what we've got here is working, or the data is suggesting that we should be looking at something else.
Counselor Kassenberg?
So just a supplemental then with regards to the motion that's on the floor, then do you want that report annually to return to this council for this council's overview?
I think that annually would be sufficient for us to look at it, and
That added to the motion?
Can we stipulate that?
yeah, we could stipulate that in the motion that.
And the seconder's okay with that? Okay. Other questions? Counselor McDermott?
No, through the warden, if things change dramatically, you would bring a report back saying they changed dramatically. So if in a year, if there's a huge dramatic change, we would find out about that, and then there would be recommendations to improve the situation. Right?
Through the warden, correct.
Counselor Aitchison?
I think I'm just beating the dead bush here again, but, so we're gonna monitor the speed, we get radars, things up and whatnot. Part of that report back, I'd like to know how many infractions were laid. Just to see, because if you've got the information on your radar screens and stuff, and you know what the speed limits are, I'd like to know if there was any enforcement of that as part of that report. If you think I'm wrong, then tell me, but I kind of think that would be kind of important.
Is that possible, John?
Through the warden, I can request that from the OPP. Can't guarantee we can receive that data, but.
For the Perth County side, that's what the OA to get that number. But you can't for the region of Waterloo, and you can't for the Oxford OPP.
Through the warden, that is correct. We are dealing with, not only were we dealing with 3 municipalities, we're dealing with 3 police authorities. That being said, I'll do everything I can to acquire that data through Perth OPP.
Okay, any more questions? Counselor Tunkowski?
Through you, Warden, to support Counselor Aitchison's request on enforcement and infraction report information, anecdotal experience from the Bornholm intersection situation, when they did have OPP enforcement in place, it did have a positive effect in quieting the situation as far as accidents and close calls were concerned. So Councillor Aitchison's request is supported. Thank you.
Okay, other questions? If not, I'm gonna have Tyler read the motion before we vote, just to make sure everybody's clear.
So through the warden, it would read as follows: that council direct staff for the ongoing monitoring, inclusive of speed studies and infractions reported annually of traffic operations at Punky Doodles Corners, and explore further refinements and improvements with Oxford County and Wilmot Township / region of Waterloo. So I think it's just confirmation from Councillor Duncan and Councillor Smith. Yep.
Did you say annually? There was something
Yes.
about annual.
Inclusive of speed studies and infractions reported annually.
Okay, everybody good? No more questions? All those in favor? Carried. Counselor Duncan?
Your warden, got one more
Okay,
maybe thing I think we should discuss on this. I know John has said he's had conversations with the enforcement authorities for those intersections. I just wonder if it would carry more weight if this council was to address a letter to each enforcement authority requesting that they perform more enforcement activities, and that we will gladly share our speed sign data with them to help them in their endeavors.
okay, so you're moving that.
I will make that a motion as well.
Counselor Kassenberg will second. We'll just give Tyler a second here to whip it up. Any more comments or questions on that? Counselor McDermott?
Will it make any difference if Wilmot uploads that road to the region? It's still the region, it's the region of Waterloo that patrols their side of the road, right? So it won't matter if the road is Wilmot Road or a regional road?
Through the warden, I know that Wilmot Township is looking at uploading their portion of what is Oxford Road 5 and Road 101A to the region. And it makes perfect sense that you have sort of upper tier levels looking after these roadways. So it would make sense that that upload occur. That's not within our jurisdiction or authority. So that is currently ongoing at the Region of Waterloo. I know last week there was a report brought to their council, or a motion brought to their council from Wilmot Township in that regard. And they deferred that upload until staff can bring a report in January.
But it won't change anything by having the region instead of Wilmot.
Through the warden, we don't really care who our third partner is. It just makes sense that it would be the region.
Okay, other questions? If not, I'm gonna let Tyler read this motion as well.
Okay. Through the warden, that council send a letter to the enforcement agencies related to Punky Doodle's Corners, advocating for increased enforcement in the area. Add to it.
Okay, moving to second, are good with that? Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Okay, anything else on this? If not, thank you, Mr. Bellotta, for joining us this morning. We appreciate it, and thank you, Jonathan. Okay, we will move on to our next item, and that's corporate services, general insurance request for proposal results. And Corey's going to join us with that report. Welcome, Corey, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Warden Agates and Council. A general insurance risk management services request for proposal was issued on September 27, 2023. This proposal was opened and closed on November 10th, 2023. Previously, Perth County went to market in November of 2016, and there was 4 respondents at that time. Due to the complexity of municipal insurance and needs, there are essentially 4 major players in Ontario in relation to insurance for municipalities. These providers are Marsh Canada, Aon Stenhouse, Reed Stenhouse, BFL Canada, and Intact. Within the report, there was 2 respondents to our request for proposal. Those 2 respondents are Aon Reed Stenhouse Inc. and Marsh Canada. They are both very comparable in their proposals to the municipalities, to us as a municipality. We also included an analysis from Dave Rickley from Program Insurance Brokers and assisted us in evaluating the responses. So throughout the proposals, they were very similar in their limits, their deductibles, et cetera. The overall limit is still at 50 million for us as a municipality, with essentially 5 million being the lower level, and then an excess limit of about $45 million. It does include other things as property, auto, as well as cyber. There is a 10-year list of our insurance within this, and the recommendation would be to retain the existing incumbent, Aon Reed Stenhouse, with an increase from our last 2023 premiums to our 2024 premiums of about 10.5%. And then this has also been incorporated into our 2024 budget. Dave Rickley is here, as well as myself, to answer any questions if council has any.
Okay, thanks, Corey. Welcome, Mr. Rickley, to Perth County Council. Do we have any questions from council on this? No. Oh, Councilor Orr?
Yeah, morning, just one question. So we have 65 million coverage for property and equipment. Seems a bit low to me, but I don't know all of our buildings. But have we done recently a replacement cost for the evaluation on all of our buildings and equipment?
So the last, we had essential facility condition assessment done that was done in 2017 that driven the values of our buildings. With our significant building of the Perth County Courthouse, representing majority of that limit. It is just under 30 million that is insured for. So we should be in a position to look at a new condition assessment to look at those values in the future.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing no questions, we have a motion that council receives the general insurance request for proposal results report and that council approves the general insurance and risk management services proposal for 2024 to AON Reed Stenhouse Inc. and that the treasurer be authorized to sign the necessary documents to effect the proposal. We need a mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor McKenzie, second by Councillor Aitchison. Any more comments, questions? All in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Now we're going to move to planning, our new draft plan, official plan. So, Susanna, are you taking the lead on this? Yeah. Morning and welcome.
Very much. Good morning.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Okay, good morning, Council. It's an honor to represent the Perth County Planning Department in presenting the draft official plan to Council this morning. This project has been a long time coming, and there are many people who have contributed to getting the project to this place. In particular, I'd like to thank the Official Plan Steering Committee, comprised of the warden, heads of councils, and the 5 CAOs who spent many hours reviewing draft policies earlier this year. The official plan is a stronger document because of your contributions. There have been many milestones since council provided direction to proceed with the official plan in 2018. In September of 2018, there was a special meeting required by the Planning Act for the public to discuss the revisions that may be required to the official plan. There were public open houses in April and May of 2019 in each of the 4 local municipalities. In July 2019 and April of 2021, notification of the preparation of a new official plan was sent to the First Nations communities. In November 2019, County Council adopted the policy directions report prepared by WSP planning consultants and accepted the Perth Natural Heritage System study prepared by the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority in principle. In April 2020, just at the time of the pandemic, County Council adopted the first comprehensive review prepared by Watson and Associates. In October 2022, from October 2022 through to October 2023, there was a very thorough natural environment consultation, including mapping and frequently asked questions, FAQs, posted on the new official plan website, and site visits from a county planner and consulting ecologist firm. From March to August of this year, the official plan steering committee reviewed and revised the draft official plan policies. And finally, on November 2nd of this year, County Council adopted the updated comprehensive review, reflecting the change in population and employment forecasts as a result of the pandemic. Which also identified the required land for a 25-year planning horizon. So now we arrive at the point of having prepared a draft official plan, requesting direction from council to proceed with the public consultation and circulation. And we have today with us Matt Alexander, who is a registered professional planner and planning consultant, who has been working on this project since 2019. And Matt has prepared a presentation to review the document with council.
Good morning, Matt. Welcome to Perth County. And the
Thank
floor
you.
is
Good
yours.
morning, Warden. Yes, here's the presentation. So we can start here. And we can go to the next slide. So my name is Matt Alexander. As Susanna mentioned, I'm a practice lead with WSP. And with the team at WSP, we've been working along with the county, with county staff for a number of years on this project. It's very exciting to take it up to this state at this point. This presentation is to provide a short amount of background information and then a pretty comprehensive overview of the draft official plan policies. And what I'm going to do is just go section by section through it and highlight a couple of key changes throughout the document. But I think during the question and answer period, if there are specific policies or specific areas that you'd like to talk about, then we can get into more detail on that. I've tried to highlight the points that are maybe the biggest changes compared to the current official plan. And then the last part of the presentation will be to discuss some next steps. So next slide, please. The County of Perth official plan is required to follow provincial policies and legislation. Of course, the process and the contents of the official plan are generally governed by the Planning Act. The document is required to be consistent with the policies of the provincial policy statement. And we also looked to the current county official plan and local official plans for some guidance on the policies. There's also been a number of new amendments to the Planning Act over the last couple of years, and so we've tried to keep up with that as much as possible to ensure that this latest draft reflects the current requirements under the Planning Act. Next slide, please. The draft official plan is based off of a growth analysis that was undertaken by Watson and Associates in 2023. This included long-term population, housing, and employment growth forecasts, as well as a discussion of urban land needs to the year of 2048. So trying to determine how much land is going to be necessary to accommodate the growth that's expected to occur by 2048. It included a macroeconomic outlook and regional employment trends, including agriculture and agriculture-related uses, retail, and small to medium-scale industrial, in order to determine the amount of growth in employment as well as the makeup of that employment. Next slide, please. Number of things to be considered when doing a new official plan. So this is the big list of growth management, economic development, and so on. As you can, I'm sure, appreciate, it's a complex undertaking to try to weave all of these things together and come up with something that's cohesive. But in working with the county, with county staff, and the working groups that Susanna mentioned, I think the draft official plan touches on each of these in a way that reflects local priorities as well as the requirements under provincial legislation. Next, please. So here we are in the big overview, and I'm essentially going through the table of content, like an annotated table of contents. So the introduction talks about what an official plan is and how to read the official plan. This is to make it a little bit more user-friendly and a little bit more accessible for members of the public as well as developers and business owners. We've updated the county profile that discusses the geography, demographics, and local municipal profiles. So this includes a 30-year population projection for the county to show growth from 42,100 people in 2021 to 62,900 people by 2051. So a fairly substantial, quite a substantial amount of growth by 2051. We have proposed a new or amended vision for the county as a safe, healthy, and inclusive community that provides opportunities for people of all ages to live, work, and thrive, a place that cultivates and sustains a vibrant local economy that is rooted in a strong agricultural identity and entrepreneurial spirit. And the purpose of having a vision statement like this is that when you're considering amendments to the official plan, you sort of do a bit of a gut check and say, does that still contribute to this vision? And if not, then how can an amendment be modified to help contribute to this vision? We also have identified 20 goals related to growth management, quality of life, economic activity, housing, natural hazards and human-made hazards, environmental protection, and more. And again, those are to help guide future decisions on official plan amendments. I'm not going to go into each of those, but if there are any that you'd like to discuss, we can talk about that. Next slide, please. Section 2 is related to growth management and the settlement area categories. So we talk about growth allocations for each of the local municipalities, growth management objectives. So we have 9 objectives related to quality of life, efficient use of infrastructure, economic development, and the provision of housing. And once again, those are to help guide decisions in the future. There are general growth management policies for growth and development monitoring, for direction to local municipalities to report on land consumption, and direction to prepare master servicing plans. So the idea of having growth and development monitoring and reporting on these things is so that in 10 years, when you do your statutory official plan review, you have that data ready. Sometimes it's difficult to go back and try to dig up information on where things are at. But if you continually monitor and keep records, then that makes that process a lot easier. We also talk about residential density targets, and this is intended to ensure that new development occurs in a manner that that is efficient, cost-effective, and helps to support healthy communities. So we're looking at 52% low density. This is a breakdown of the makeup of housing types in residential areas. So approximately 52% would be single detached, semi-detached, and triplexes. Approximately 31% would be medium density, so houses, townhouses, and quadruplexes, and about 17% high density apartments. This would be for new development. We also talk about intensification and infilling policies to make better use of the existing built-up area and urban areas, and provide policies related to employment land conversion. So when you have lands designated for employment uses, it's important to protect those because it's sometimes difficult to locate new employment uses in existing areas. And so we've proposed policies to help ensure that you're not eliminating employment uses or employment lands that you need for future employment uses. Next slide, please. We also talk about the settlement area categories and sort of overarching structure and hierarchy of settlement areas. The serviced urban areas in Perth County include Listowel, Mitchell, Milverton, and Atwood and Shakespeare are partially serviced urban areas. These are the areas that should be the focus of most of the new growth in the county. But there are also a number of villages and hamlets, which are existing concentrations of development and residential uses, really a mix of uses in each of these. And they need to be identified and addressed as well. But overall, these are not typically serviced with municipal sewer and water, and therefore are not identified as being the focus areas for a lot of new growth. Likely there will be new lot creation or intensification within these villages and hamlets, but not in a major concentrated way. Next slide, please. There are also a number of new schedules that have been prepared by the county. And so we have an example here, and I wanted to highlight, rather than look at each of the schedules, because there are a number of many communities in Perth County, but I wanted to identify how to read these schedules and what they show. So you can see the map on the left is for Atwood, and the legend is located on the right. Most of the sort of pale yellow is designated neighborhoods, and these are your residential uses. pretty strictly residential, mostly low density, but we are introducing policies that would allow some flexibility on that. The brighter magenta or pink with the white hatch through that, those are your urban mixed use areas, and these are historic downtowns or main streets where you have a mix of residential and commercial uses. The darker purple is the corridor commercial, so the types of car-oriented commercial uses. Orange is institutional, schools, community centers, municipal properties, that kind of thing. And the lighter purple are the employment areas where you see the more intensive manufacturing or warehousing type employment uses. And we've also identified natural environment locations, natural environment areas, and open space on these schedules. As we go through this process, typically the public comments that we get are in response to the mapping that's shown. And through the process, we usually end up refining things a little bit where maybe the mapping is not as accurate as it could be, or if it has erroneously identified something as employment that has already been converted. And so you can expect to see minor changes to this. But overall, the schedules that are presented today represent the vision moving forward. I think we can go to the next slide. So also in section 2, growth management and settlement area categories, we provide policies for settlement areas to be the focus of growth and development and the efficient use of land and infrastructure, supporting healthy and complete communities and promoting economic prosperity. We've identified policies for minimum separation distance from agricultural uses. So where you have agricultural uses that may impact residential development within settlement areas, we've provided some policies for that. And policies for settlement area expansions. The current provincial policy statement allows for adjustments to settlement area boundaries where land is added and removed in the same process. And so it was important to include some policies related to that to ensure that that's done in a comprehensive and well thought out manner. As if you wanted to expand the settlement area to accommodate a big new development, that would have to go through a comprehensive review exercise, which is essentially what we've done to inform this official plan. Next slide, please. Section 3 gets into the nitty-gritty of the land use policies for each of the land use designations. So the different colors that I showed on the schedule earlier. We talk about neighborhoods, urban mixed use, commercial corridor, and so on. I think I more or less covered this when I was talking about the schedule, so we might not need to go through the details here. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. This is a close-up of that Atwood schedule to give you a better look at how these different land use designations fit together and where they're located, at least in this example. Next slide, please. Other designations, employment. So the employment policies are responding to in part in responding to the emergence of new industries such as high technology and the knowledge economy. The role of traditional industries is changing. We're not seeing the same types of land-intensive employment uses like major factories. Instead, you're seeing things like warehouses and major distribution centers. And so we recognize that manufacturing continues to be a part of the local economy, but also recognize that there are other employment uses occurring in the county. Again, institutional includes public service and community uses and facilities, and the village and hamlet designation recognizes smaller settlement areas within Perth County that aren't serviced or which have partial services. Next slide, please. So here's an example of one of the village or hamlet communities, and you can see the entire area. It has one color, it has one designation, but the designation permits a mix of uses. And the idea is that, we recognize that people live here, they work here, there are businesses that operate here. As I mentioned before, it's not intended to be a major center for intensification or new development or expansion due to the limited amount of servicing, and trying to avoid things like a rural sprawl sort of situation. But the policies are intended to be flexible so that people can continue to live and make a life here. Next slide, please. Another designation is the rural cluster designation, which recognizes small concentrations of single detached dwellings within the county's agricultural areas. So these aren't as big as a hamlet or village, but they are places where people live, and so that needs to be identified and provided with policies. The urban fringe is another interesting designation. These are areas that are located on lands that abut the boundaries of the city of Stratford and the town of St. Mary's. And the purpose of designating this area is to ensure that again, where people live, where they work, are allowed to continue and maybe grow to an extent within those boundaries. But we don't necessarily want those to become new focal points of the community, because we already have a number of focal points in the community. And of course, the agricultural designation, which permits farming as well as agricultural related uses and on-farm diversified uses. Next slide, please. And this gives you an example of the urban fringe designation abutting the city of Stratford. Next slide. We talk about mineral aggregate and petroleum resources, natural environment and water resources, open space designations, and recreation designations as well. Let's go to the next slide. And overall, the purpose of having these designations is to provide guidance to the zoning bylaws, the local zoning bylaw. So there are general use provisions, and then the specifics of heights, densities, setbacks, and all of that gets implemented at the local level. Section 4 of the draft official plan talks about county and municipal general policies. And so these are, again, they're broad policy directions to help guide decision-making in the future. 4.1 is related to economic development, and it establishes the appropriate settlement structure as well as employment uses and how to encourage the type of job creation that you want to see in the county. We also talk about housing, community services and facilities, parks and open spaces, natural and human-made hazards, cultural heritage, transportation infrastructure and servicing, and urban design and built form. And within these, there is some process type policies. So when there is a natural or human-made hazard present and new development is proposed, you would look to these policies to determine how to mitigate or avoid that hazard. And that's the purpose of these policies. Next slide, please. Section 4.2 is related to housing. And of course, this is a massive issue across the province right now, and it has been for a number of years. The intent of this plan is to encourage the creation of housing for all members of the community, including affordable and attainable housing, accessible and visitable housing, supportive housing, and housing that can adapt to new needs of residents. One of the issues that's contributed to the housing crisis in Ontario over the past few years is that historically communities have developed with sort of a monoculture of housing types, such as single detached home ownership. And what we found is that doesn't account for all the needs of all of residents. And so we're trying to prepare policies for the future to actually address those needs. And we're doing that through housing objectives, including housing targets, permitting a broader range of housing options, and facilitating intensification, so that somebody who, maybe owns a single detached home on a large lot has the opportunity to find has an opportunity to, maybe split that lot or build a duplex or otherwise create more of an income property for themselves, which at the same time provides a more affordable housing option for people in the community. Next slide, please. So this is table 4.1, housing affordability forecast by tenure. This was coming from the growth management comprehensive review work that was done to inform the official plan. And it gives you a sense of looking at household income, home ownership cost, or rent, and the number of rental dwellings and ownership dwellings that are expected to exist from 2023 to 2033. So this isn't a mandate. This is an expectation, and you can use this table, these numbers, to monitor growth and affordability over the years. It gives you a benchmark to measure against. Next slide, please. Related to affordable market housing, new policies talk about the increasing the supply of attainable housing through updated local zoning bylaws, permitting increased residential densities where the services are available, and a full range of housing types, as well as policies to provide infrastructure like sewer and water in a timely manner to ensure that expansion can occur as it's needed. This helps support reduction of housing costs by streamlining the development approvals process, negotiating agreements with public and private sectors to address the provision of affordable market housing, considering innovative and alternative residential development standards, and the preparation of more detailed housing strategy that outlines annual housing targets, mixes of housing types, affordability thresholds, and related data. Next slide, please. We also talk about age-friendly communities. So as the baby boom generation continues to age, we're seeing new needs for accommodating their needs. County and local municipalities are directed to work together to improve the social inclusion of residents of all ages, including seniors and other residents. Age-friendly communities is really a development concept that says, you don't necessarily need everybody to move into a retirement home. You can actually plan and develop your neighborhoods in a way that is that accommodates and is friendly to seniors as well as young children and people with different needs. Policies related to additional residential units have been updated to reflect new Planning Act requirements to permit additional residential units, and these are your basement apartments, coach house suites, granny suites, and that sort of thing. And so they would be permitted in both new and existing dwellings. A total maximum of 2 additional residential units would be permitted on a residential property when services exist. And that would be subject to all other standards. So you would have the local municipalities establishing parking standards for this, and it would be subject to servicing ability to service the property and that sort of thing. We've also included a policy related to tiny homes. That's an emerging housing option that's come forward, essentially allowing local municipalities to provide regulations for smaller minimum lot sizes or frontages to accommodate tiny homes. Next slide, please. Section 5 of the official plan is land division, and it addresses consents, severance applications, as well as plans of subdivision and condominium. I think these are more or less unchanged from the current official plan. The provincial policy has essentially remained the same, but we've probably updated some of the language to make it a little bit more user-friendly and a little bit clearer with the process. Next slide, please. Section 6 covers implementation and interpretation. And once again, this is really about laying out what the process is for planning matters so that members of the public, the development industry, and employers have an idea of how change happens in the county. So it includes policies for monitoring and reviewing the official plan, consultation and participation, coordination of cross-jurisdictional matters, planning administration and tools, and those are things like site plan control or part lot control. A lot of the nitty-gritty of how things get done in planning, and the pre-application consultation and complete application requirements, which are intended to help streamline the approvals process so that it costs less for the county to process applications, and the applications get processed more quickly. And interpretation policies, so simple definitions and that sort of thing. Next slide, please. So that is a whirlwind tour of the policies of the official plan. The next steps following this meeting, if council is satisfied with this, the draft official plan would be circulated to the province, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, for a minimum 90-day commenting period. The idea is that they would review the draft and provide comments after about 90 days. We've been seeing some delays in that, but they have informed us that they intend to speak with municipalities about their draft official plans, even if they don't provide written comments within that time frame. So after 90 days, then the county is permitted to provide notice of the statutory public meeting. But in the meantime, we're proposing 4 public open houses in each of the local municipalities in order to go over the policies, hear from the public, and then subsequently make any revisions that might be necessary to help address public concerns. And then following the statutory public meeting, the final draft of the official plan, including addressing comments from the province and the public, would be presented to council for adoption, and if adopted, then submitted to the province for approval after that. And the timeline for that, we are thinking about looking at February and March for the open houses, I believe, and the circulation to the province. If council provides that direction today, then that would likely happen. I mean, it could happen this week, but early in January, I think, is most likely. So I'm not sure if there is a last slide here. It might just be a nice photo, but there we go. So I'd be happy to answer any questions or talk about any policies in more detail with you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of Jerry?
Yeah, just a minor comment.
Okay.
For the draft on page 16, and Council Orr helped point this out.
Give us a second, Rachel. Bring up the actual thing so we can see it on the screen, because my computer decided to take a hiatus this morning, so I can't see what you're talking about.
Perfect. So right there, 1.3.4, we're missing the population of Perth East. Okay. Well, 12,525 according to 2021. And the second one, the heritage designations, page 125. Oh, am I on the wrong page? I thought it was 125, Rachel. 25. Or whatever page the designations are on. You list 25 Mill Street in Milverton, the old municipal building. It's no longer there. We have a new building. It's been there about 20 years. So just a minor, I'm not sure if we're allowed just to stroke that off, if there's a process to remove the listing of a designated site. Those are the only 2 things I have. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Councilor McDermott?
Yeah, this process as it goes forward, can designations still be changed?
Through you, Warden, yes, designations may still be changed. Generally, through a comprehensive process like this, we don't usually recommend that council take this opportunity to change designations based on resident or property owners' requests. They, of course, have the ability to apply for an official plan amendment at any time. And so if there is a designation change that's being requested to facilitate development, we would encourage them to file an official plan amendment application. The fact is that once this is, we're still quite a ways away, at least probably 120 days or more away from getting this official plan adopted. And following that, there's essentially no timeline on how long the province will take to approve it. We're seeing the province taking a very long time to approve new official plans these days. And so if there is something that that a landowner would like to see changed, if it's not an error, then I would encourage them to apply for an amendment.
No, it's just that I've been getting an awful lot of phone calls, a huge concern on this natural heritage. And none of that has been basically addressed for a lot of people. So I want to make sure that going forward, that if there's any kind of errors, they're not going to be spending a huge pile of money getting any errors or anything changed.
Through you, Warden, with regard to natural environment features and that mapping, there is the potential that the mapping is not 100% accurate. The process for that is to use mapping from different sources, including the province or conservation authorities. And sometimes that's based on aerial imagery or historic mapping. It doesn't necessarily represent what exists on the ground. Where that or when that really impacts people is when they bring forward a development application. So if, for example, somebody owns a property, a rural property that is shown as having a certain natural feature on their property, they can continue to use their property as they always have. It doesn't prevent them from continuing to use their property the way they have. But if they wanted to come forward with a plan of subdivision or a severance application or something like that, then they would go through a process of confirming whether those natural features are there or not. And if it's been changed, then essentially document that and move forward with the application. But if those natural features are located on that property, then they need to take steps to address that if they're moving forward with the development application. What we see a lot of the time is people see the maps, they see natural heritage or natural environment on their property, and they think all of a sudden, I don't know what, that they're going to lose the right to use their property, and that's just not the case, even especially with agricultural uses. So if you have a farm and there's a natural environment feature identified on the farm property, but you plow those fields and, you know, graze livestock or what have you, they can continue to do that. It doesn't have an effect. And so I would encourage you to direct those folks to look at the policies and read through the policies to try to understand how it would affect their property. If it's an error, then if there's documentation that contradicts the mapping, then we can certainly try to update that. And that's what the whole public process is for. But if it's really just a concern about natural environment designation on property and how that's going to affect somebody, odds are it won't affect them unless they want to develop their property for a more intensive or lot creation type use. I hope that helps, you know, reassure folks a little bit.
Not really, but okay.
Councillor Aitchison?
One comment you just made there kind of alarms me. That mapping isn't necessarily correct. So there was a case, The case in Eastern Ontario just recently, the Conservation Authority had charged the farmer over a new agriculture building and ended up in the courts, and the farmer won. The legal costs were astronomical. But the farmer was not wrong. It was the Conservation Authority that was wrong. But I've had different people phone me up saying this is showing this, and like, that's not a fair chance that could be accurate. But, and he just indicated that the mapping's not necessarily accurate.
Through you, Warden, the mapping that is provided in this official plan is not the result of a survey that's been done across the entire county. So we have not gone out with surveyors to survey the exact boundaries of every natural environment feature in the county. It is based on, as I mentioned, existing mapping that's been provided, which may be out of date, or it may have been done through aerial interpretation, where they look at images of the landscape and draw sort of, let's say, fuzzy lines. So it's not 100% accurate, as I mentioned, and through a development review process, the boundaries are confirmed, just as you would with, let's say, the foundations of a building before digging a new well or something like that. It's there is no way to ensure that this mapping is 100% accurate, and the process of confirming this through a development application is the way that we ensure that natural features that actually exist continue to be protected. Now, in the case that you mentioned, if it was the Conservation Authority bringing charges against a property owner, they would have been relying on their own mapping data. They wouldn't be looking to the official plan. And so, as you mentioned, they were incorrect, and that went through the process that it goes through. And as I mentioned earlier, if you want to continue to use your property the way that it has been, then you can do that. Something like a new farm building or a new structure or a new lot creation, that has to go through a process where you confirm whether those features are there or not. It sounds like that was a case of the Conservation Authority acting before they had confirmed things, unfortunately.
Well, just a little further comment to what he just said. Well, that he wasn't allowed to use his property in his agricultural business. They stopped him. It took almost 3 years to get through the courts before he could actually do what he wanted to do. So, you know, we talk about speeding up the process and making things more streamlined and less red tape. And to me, we seem to be going in the opposite direction. And just bringing this up as a point, because are we going to go through this official plan in a little more detail here yet?
Yes.
Good, because I had a few questions.
Mr. Castleberg?
Can I just check with staff, was there an effort after the mapping was received to offer to the community a ground truthing experience so that those who had concerns, and they were notified, as I understand it, by mail at least once, could register concerns about the performance of the mapping that was done and features that were attributed to their lots?
I can speak to this if you like.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, so where there was an acre or difference change in the natural environment area in rural areas, or minor changes in the urban areas, those folks were identified and they landowner letters were mailed to them. So there were approximately 2,700 letters mailed to the landowner community in October 2022. Following that, we received calls from 416 landowners through email, phone, or drop-in. 246 hard copy maps were mailed out in response to the landowner requests. There were 174 site visits requested. So at County Council's direction, the planning department had a planner available, Stephanie Van, to visit properties and meet with landowners and compare the mapping, which was prepared by the Conservation Authority using aerial photos. So 118 site visits were completed, and where there were specific questions, County Council engaged an ecological consulting firm, North South Environmental. So 25 site visits were completed in order to provide reports to specific property owners. As a result of the year-long process, I don't believe there is anybody who had asked for a visit who didn't receive it. So that was Stephanie Van's work and her contract is completed. But my understanding was that 100% of the people who requested visits received a visit. And one of the significant comments that was received by the planning department was where there was a meadow or thicket on a landowner's property. There were questions with regards to how that piece of land could be used. And as meadows and thickets are not identified in the provincial policy statement as within the definition of significance directly as an ecological feature, they have been removed from the mapping. So it was a thorough process. There were many site-specific amendments, changes to the mapping through that year process. One of the comments that we received was, how does the natural environment consultation dovetail with the official plan work? And I mean, that is an excellent question. But the reason it was done in advance of the official plan was because the natural environment features are dynamic and they change on the landscape. It was important to do that ground truthing work in order to have updated mapping by the time we got to the open houses.
Okay. More questions? So I know Jim wants to go through it a little more in detail. So you want to do section by section?
Well, I just was reading through and there was a few spots I thought sounded soft is the word I'm going to use. Like may was the word may was used a few times, and I'm thinking it's either yes or it's no.
Okay, well, that's.
But I wouldn't mind taking a break and standing up and stretching before we start that, if you don't mind.
Okay, sure. We'll take a 5-minute break.
In almost 2 hours. I
Okay,
need to move.
sure. We'll take a
Sorry, but
5-minute.
I've got arthritis in my hip and I gotta move.
Yeah, we'll take a 5-minute break and then we'll bring up the official plan on the screen and we'll go through it section by section. If there's questions, comments, we'll.
2 or 3 spots I kind of had a question.
Okay, we'll have a 5-minute break. Refer to us the page, we'll try to get the page up on the screen so everybody can see it. Okay, we'll wait for Matt to come back. There he is, okay. All right, we will resume. So if questions, I know Jim has some, or Councilor Aitchison has some questions. If we tell us what page it is, Tyler will get it up on the screen so that we can all see the wording and what you're talking about. If anyone else has questions, let us know.
So I apologize up front. So I've read the official plan. Yesterday I wanted to go back on and go 2.3.1. So I was gonna come back through it all. We had no hydro. So no hydro, no internet, no write down, no reference, and I didn't have time last night. So I can't honestly give you the specific page, but good idea. And the person was on intensification. I can look. I'm sure I read through there the first time they wanted intensification, which I am assuming means density, improved by 10%. And then there's another spot it says 40 on a new development somewhere else. But so my point is intensification, if your goal is only 10%, that's not high enough. Not near high enough in my mind. And what I'm saying by that is everything we do is protect agricultural land, protect agricultural land, protect agricultural land. But you don't want to bump the intensification up extremely high in order to save more agricultural land to build the houses that need to be built. It's a point that I have, and I think a couple here will agree with that. And I just was talking with our manager of planning, and I've had people phoning me a lot lately. And there are certain properties designated for agriculture in the rural areas, and we all know where they are, that will never be farmed as long as the earth exists. But yet they couldn't put a house up on it because we're protecting agricultural land and it's zoned agricultural. Like, and somebody say, well, okay, and the other thing is that you want to go towards your more built-up areas where they have full services. So in 2023 to this date, London's dumped 131 million liters of raw sewage into the Thames. I'm thinking a septic system out in the countryside would work better than that. Personal view. But that was one of the first things I picked up when I was reading through this. I didn't think the intensification was near high enough.
We do have it up on the screen now. And it does say that a minimum of 10% of all new residential units created.
And to me, that's not high enough. But you talk about affordable housing, and I've heard that just from our consultant here today, affordable and more diverse housing and whatnot. Well, if the mainstream is single family, we've all seen it, and if you're only increasing the intensification 10%, you're not making anything affordable.
Staff want to comment on that?
I can if you like. Yes, so through the warden, the intensification target for both residential and employment intensification in section 2321, which is on the screen now, is from the comprehensive review prepared by Watson and Associates. And this intensification target is with regards to redevelopment and rebuilding in existing settlement areas. The official plan also has a policy around evaluating progress through residential towards the residential and employment targets, which is, as the policy states, to be done every 3 to 5 years. So this is new for the county, like to be identifying a clear target in the official plan with regards to intensification and to be identifying a monitoring mechanism. And that said, and again, the rationale or the basis for this is from the comprehensive review that was prepared for Watson Associates. That said, if council would like to revise the intensification targets we're receiving, that would be something that you could do today.
Councilor Katzenberg?
I think I want to try an example and test an assumption, because I think that might help us in a practical sense. So my hunch is that this is about looking largely, like looking at the totality of new residential units and expecting that 1 in 10 will be created through intensification in existing lots. This is my theory, my working theory anyway. So for example, my property in Atwood, I could quite easily put at least 1, if not 2, tiny homes because I have a large lot, right? Those units could reflect that intensification. Likewise, redevelopment of a single family dwelling to a duplex or a triplex could represent some of that intensification, I think. So I'm dropping some examples on the table so that Planner Reed can help us understand what that means, but I don't think it relates inherently to brand new builds like greenfield builds and so forth. It could be wrong, and it would be helpful if that were explained.
Yeah, through the warden, shall I take this question?
Yes, sure.
Okay, yeah, so that is essentially what intensification has been. And the resources of the planning department have been dedicated to date to completing the official plan and getting it to this point. But we have also had initial conversations with our GIS colleagues around developing tools in order to monitor intensification over time. So what we're in conversation about is identifying the established settlement area boundary now, like the existing settlement boundaries for the service settlement areas now, and then tallying up what the current number of residential units is now, and then being able to report on that in the 3 to 5 year monitoring requirement that's identified in the official plan. So as Councillor Kassenberg has outlined, that would be an example of intensification, those examples. The other type of intensifications that we're seeing, more so in listable, I would say, is where there is an existing single detached residence and it's being removed and perhaps a fourplex is being constructed on that single detached residential lot. So that would be an example of intensification.
So should the wording be changed? Because this to me means all new residential. Should it be existing 10% on existing residential and something different for new builds?
We certainly are open to any suggestions in order to clarify that. But you can see what is 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth bullet down where there's the monitoring policy every 3 to 5 years that we would evaluate progress towards those targets. So, I mean, my read of that policy suggests that as I think the examples that Councillor Kasenberg offered were good ones, that 1 in every 10 of new residential units would be through intensification, that we would be able to monitor in that way. I mean, the critical thing is that you get that data in front of you and then you're able to like put your mind to, is this policy working?
Mr. Richardson?
And thank you for clarification. But I've still got a bit of a problem with that. So back in the day, every lot where there was a house built was 1 acre. Let's be honest, like, we're not trying to fool anyone here. I'm gonna pick on North Perth, for example. We did one in land division. First forays in the land division, 5 1 acre lots. And it was on maybe the east end of Listowel maybe, and I'm thinking, good God, 5 acres and you're putting up 5 houses. So that would fall under this category to some degree, right? There's a house there, so if you want to do some other thing, you're looking at 10%. There should have been 15 houses on those 5 lots, not 5. That's just an example. And we've got the odd one in Perth South like that, like Seaverville. Those lots are massive.
Okay, Councillor Duncan?
Thank you. I think what Jim's referring to more would be more in 2.3.1, where we have to look at our residential density targets. And if we look at it, we're looking at 52% still singles and semis. I'm questioning, is that high enough, or should our targets be, maybe we need to increase the high density and the medium density more so than the single family homes.
Thanks, Councillor Duncan. I had that wrote down here too from the presentation, 52% down.
What? Because we're still at, 50% low density at this point. And to keep swallowing up farmland, I don't know if that's productive.
So what would we change it to?
I'm going to sit back and I'm going to wait and give everybody else a chance to comment on that. What they think we should change it to.
Okay, Councillor Kassenberg?
I think that the first section that Councillor Aitchison asked about, I think the real intent there is to try to encourage infill in existing developed residential neighborhoods, right? And that infill can take a few different forms. And perhaps the wording isn't specific enough that that's the intent, but to me, that would be the intent, right? Some of the lowest hanging fruit that we have in terms of addressing affordability of housing would be to try to infill in existing residential neighborhoods through apartment creation in homes, through tiny home or other use of garden suites and conversion of garage spaces. Those are things that will take probably far less time against the so-called red tape in the planning processes that exist in the province than greenfield developments for residential, right? So I'm thinking that section really is trying to incentivize or encourage us and the communities to develop that way. With regards to the residential targets, I don't actually see that being expressed as a target yet, Councillor Duncan. It talks about the land needs assessment and demand. The question is that actually aspirational, and us saying we intend to do something about this, other than something that comes from projections from a model, right? So to me, I think that we might have to do something more. I agree with you on this. I'm not sure if I remember if something more was done in there, spending hours poring over this document. I won't say that I recall, but clearly, I think most of us have that sentiment that has been expressed, which is that 52% almost feels like continuation of the current approach, and we know that it's not generating the kind of housing and not being responsible towards the preservation of farmland that we aspire to, right? So maybe we do need to do something about this. But my cautioned comment, and it's a comment I've made at North Perth, you've heard me make it, is that we won't get to any targets that we set unless we hold every application to the lens and demand that there's some compliance with some of these standards. And as long as we allow developments to sort of come to our table and say, well, it's not really our responsibility to deal with affordability, let the next developer do that, then we're not going to get any traction on this.
Okay, so what do you want to do?
Could I ask, like, for clarity?
Yep.
From Planner Reed's intimate knowledge of this document and the process behind it, is there a firm direction that says residential density in new developments, for example, let's use just that one, towards this kind of mix of density?
The mix of,
Yes.
would you like me to do?
Low, medium, and high.
Let's relax the rules a little bit.
5231.
Make it easier, okay? So I'm going to relax the rules here a little bit, just to make it a little easier.
Okay.
For everybody, and I think it'd be.
You don't want to make it too easy.
That's right, too. Yeah, I think we'll just relax a little bit. So go ahead, Stan.
So you're talking about the 5231, is that what you're talking about?
I'm saying anywhere in this official plan, is there we aspire or we instruct or we give guidance that we shoot for a target of 45% low density and 38% medium density and 20% high, whatever. My math is probably terrible. Dean, have you been adding this up for me?
Over by about 18 points.
Oh, well. It's all good, right? Like, this, to me, does not feel like direction. This feels like we have this study, and the study recommended this based on a model. And I think many of us aspire some kind of clarification so that it actually is not a loophole that gets jumped through, but that it holds, it sticks.
Yeah.
Continuation of what we've been doing all along.
Yeah.
Pretty close.
Yeah. So this is a great question, and Andrea and I have wrestled with this as well. So the 523117 comes from the 2023 comprehensive review as cited in this policy that's on the screen. And of note, the comprehensive review reports that at the time that it was prepared, that 86% of the residential development in Perth County is low density. So I guess in reflecting on this, it seems what we're switching to, or what we're sort of stepping into with this new official plan is conversations with the development community about how the official plan anticipates that the density of new builds will become higher. So I guess for council's consideration, what does that conversation look like with the development community, and what's reasonable for the developers in Perth County who generally have a model of building single detached residences? The second question that Councillor Piesenberg asks is with regards to how is this implemented? And it's Tyler or Rachel, if you could scroll just a little bit down to the next paragraph so we can see it there. So yeah, so
Tyler's
is it right there? So the paragraph that starts residential zones will be identified in the local zoning bylaws. So that is the implementation of 231 of the residential density targets. So that the density targets with regards to 52 low density, 31 medium density, 17 high density would then be incorporated into the implementing zoning bylaw. So that we would anticipate that we would see that reflected in the low, medium, and high residential zones in the zoning bylaws. And just one final comment This breakdown of low, medium, and high is what Watson and Associates, the land economists who prepared the comprehensive review, have used in order to identify the growth allocation, so the 25-year planning horizon, which is directed by the PPS, and that is how we base the new designations at the service settlement areas.
Go ahead, Councilor Casper.
I just don't want to see in this official plan a vagueness around the intent of this council with regards to seeing a shift from low density to higher density. At least that's my take on it, right? And if a developer could step forward and say, well, that's guidance, but I don't have to live by that. And the pre-consultation, you ask them to, and they say, no, let the next developer do that. Then I think that's a fail. That's my sense around policy here.
Councilor McDermott?
I understand what everybody's saying, but if you change the numbers, that's okay. Can we economically deliver on it? If you say that the person has bought some land and it costs them so much money, can they build, say, apartments or medium density and economically do that? That's where, just a thought on that is like, can you economically get a result that you want? Like, is like their costs, and obviously they have to have a profit. If they're a business, they've got to stay in business. Can they provide what we want and still stay in business? That's just a thought, like when you're thinking of the numbers and how you'd like to change the numbers, like, can we actually get somebody to build that?
Councilor McKenzie?
This is kind of ties into what Hugh was saying. Like the problem, when you have a developer come in and do a planned subdivision, they want to stage it. At least that's where we seem to get into problems. So of course, the first stage is going to be single detached houses. And we're going to do a higher density in the next stages. So they do the first stage, and then the second stage just sits and sits. Well, then they come back and we can't sell this. We have to continue what we're doing. And I don't know what, how you tie that numbers in, but we have to be firm and say, like, if this is what you want to do, like, and I know we've had the argument that you want to do it, put some semis in, put your singles in and have them, do it as you're going along with it. You really don't want to do that because it disrupts the community that you're trying to create. And apartments are a whole different thing, and you've got to be careful where you want to put apartments. Like North Perth has done a good job across from Walmart there. They're in an area where it's all apartments. You can't take and plunk an apartment building in the backyard of somebody's, in a subdivision, or they're going to be looking down at all the other residential areas, and the people don't like that, and I can see that point of view. So, that's a little harder thing to adjust as well.
Okay, anyone else on this? Jim?
I've listened to all the comments. I've been quiet here for a minute. And I agree with the council, like Councilor Willenhall, or Mackenzie there just said, they don't want apartments in residential areas because they're gonna look down at them. Well, I'm sorry, but this is 2024 coming up here shortly. If you don't want somebody looking down at you, then sell your house and move somewhere else. Maybe that's being mean, but it's a fact of life. And the reason I use the word say soft, so we've been having this discussion here. And we've got 2 or 3 different interpretations already, so I can take 3 different planners and some of these things in here. If you don't completely definitively say what you want, goes back to what Councilor McKenzie just said. Well, we start with the single family and all of a sudden, no, we can't sell those. We want to do more single family. You've got to definitively define what you want and stick to your guns. Otherwise, it will never happen. Because I'll take 3 different planners and take just about anything and we've discussed here so far, and I'm gonna get 3 different interpretations. Okay.
Okay, Counselor Orr?
I have no problem with these numbers. I sometimes worry about us around the table, because I would think that most of us live in our single detached homes. I don't know for a fact, but, and I'm backing up to when I lived in the Fraser Valley. If I go back to the Fraser Valley, there's beautiful homes. There isn't one family living there. There's 4 families living in one home. So when we are going to be asked for diversity, which we need to also accept that other cultures live differently in one large home, and they have their seniors and their kids there. So again, I have nothing opposed to single detached homes as long as we have more people living with them. And maybe we make rules about, make sure that, maybe I use myself as an example. I have a nice home, but I've made sure that if I ever need somebody else to live with me, there's separate entrances in that. So that's just my 2 cents.
Okay, anyone else? So what do you want to do about this? Counselor Katzenberg?
I do think that right now, even if this were our aspiration and reflects a change in the current pattern of builds, it feels like it's a tunnel wide enough to drive a car through. And so my hunch here is that language would need to be tightened if we intend to try to shape our housing environment with specificity. And so I agree with Jim that, like, we need to be clear. If we don't want to do this, then that's fine too, but we're taking a stand somewhere in terms of directing future development into either some categories like shown, or we're taking a stand saying it's a free-for-all and the status quo can continue. I think that the latter choice is the wrong choice, and that's, one person's opinion, right? I think that we have a responsibility to guide and direct development in our communities. That's why we do official planning in the first place. That's why Councillor Eggets and Councillor Aitchison and Councillor McKenzie and I have sat around a table for hours and hours and hours over the last 4 or 5 years. And I think that we have the responsibility to do what's right in the midst of difficult housing times. And setting these densities is important. So it shouldn't be sort of a gentle, here's guidance. Here's what the numbers or the model tell us. It should be, here are our instructions to developers around density, whether that's in the zoning bylaw or not. The official plan needs to make sure that it allows for that it's not going to circumscribe that or say that we can't talk about that, right? So I leave it to the planning team to figure out where that goes. But as for me in North Perth, I certainly want to see this kind of guidance telling developers it's played this way or you don't build.
Okay, so do you want staff to go back and relook at this and then bring something back?
On this particular issue, I think it makes some sense. As much as I hate to delay a process.
What's another month? Been how many years?
Yeah.
How many years we've been, Susanna? 5?
Mayor.
Is that 5 years or five comments?
For council's consideration, if I could speak freely, is that acceptable? One possibility would be to proceed with the plan as it is, recognizing that there are a lot of reasons to have a new official plan available in the community. And then to provide the planning department with direction to proceed with a secondary plan to consider more specifically the density levels for the service settlement areas. The comprehensive review that council has adopted supports the densities that are in this plan now. So there is a reason to continue with this. It is a stretch goal for the development community. Then we can continue to work on this, receive continue to monitor the intensifications. Like there are a lot of programs and systems that we can put in place in order to continue to inform this discussion, but have this as a starting point.
I realize that, but things have evolved and changed in the, I don't want to say how many years we've been at this. Everything keeps changing. We had WSP even go back and reevaluate numbers because things weren't up to date. And so, you know, when we put this out to the public, I want to make sure we're putting out what we're comfortable with and what council wishes, not numbers here and then, oh, well, we can change this. That gives the wrong message to the public, I think. We need to give the right message at the very start. So if we need changes, we need it to go back. I think it needs to go back. We need to make changes and then council move forward. Hugh?
Just a question for Councilor Sundberg. When we're talking about these numbers, so a developer comes in, so then what we would be doing, would we be holding them to these numbers? Like if they have a development, they've got to have, if they can have, say the number we have here is 52% low density and 31 is medium and 17 is high. So if you're doing a development, would you have to meet all three of those numbers on your development?
I respond cautiously, Councilor McDermott, because I understand the complexity of that question. And I can't say that I'm necessarily wise enough to have a complete and thoughtful answer. But generally, I think that direction should be there. That if you're bringing a plan of subdivision, and maybe there's a size limit or something, Councilor McDermott, if you're bringing a subdivision plan to the table, you better have something that looks like that and skewed in favor of the higher and medium density, right? Like if you're going to put in 10 units, well, maybe it's 5 singles and 3 and 2 at that apartments. I don't know.
No. I just wanted to understand what we were talking about here. That's all.
Because I think, I mean, if I may say, I think with regards to things like fourplexes, generally there's, as of right at this point, right? In R4 zoning is pretty common, at least in North Perth. And so there's pretty strong right to just go ahead and build 4 on a single lot. Well, okay, that's not what's going to be covered inherently by this. And in fact, in some ways, that fourplex is higher density, right? We've increased the density naturally. But it's the bigger projects that we have more concern and want to shape, if you ask me, a little bit better.
No, that's fine. It was just a question that popped into my mind. We were talking about.
It's a great question.
Just also point council to section 4221, which is the affordable market housing policy. So I generally agree with the discussion, like the residential density targets do not have an obligation for the developer to have a mix of densities. However, 4221, which is the affordable market housing, does say that 20% of all new residential development within service settlement areas shall be affordable. So that's not with regards to density, it's with regards to affordability. And one of the observations from the housing needs assessments prepared by Watson and Associates in order to support the housing, the HAF grant application was that rental housing is a good direction for providing affordable units in the community. There's different conversations with regards to both what does higher density look like, that's more around protecting agricultural land, and what does affordable look like, that's more around addressing the housing crisis. Maybe that Matt Alexander has comments on this topic. I'm not sure if he has anything to offer.
Do you have any comments, Matt, that you wish to make?
Thank you, Warden. Just to elaborate on something that Susanna had mentioned, the 52%, that breakdown, as I understand it from Watson's report, that is that would represent the entire county. That's a breakdown of housing types across the entire county. And so the way that the county would use that is at the 5-year or 10-year review of the official plan to check progress towards that. And so one of the things that was mentioned was, you know, if there's a new development proposed, do they need to meet that breakdown? Not necessarily. So if they did meet that breakdown, it still would not help achieve that overall. Well, I mean, it would help, but you wouldn't see a lot of progress towards that overall breakdown for the whole county. But instead, the way that you would see it shift is through some of the redevelopment of the existing properties into the higher density pieces. Something that I also wanted to emphasize was that 52% single detached, for example, that might represent the existing house, the houses that exist today and will continue to exist until 2041 or 2051. That aren't going to be torn down anytime soon because they've just been purchased by a young family or something. So that's something to keep in mind. But I think what we would do in the between now and the public meetings or the revised version that goes to council for adoption is clarify this. So Susanna had mentioned that the existing breakdown is about 86% single detached in the county, and Watson was forecasting that it should be like about 52. We can clarify that better in the policy so that it shows it states the shift. It shows what the change is anticipated to be. We could certainly also provide clearer direction on what the density or the housing type proportions should be in those greenfield developments. We can do that while the province reviews this draft official plan, or we can try to rework that before sending it to the province. And I think one of the things when we do open houses or public meetings is we talk about the kinds of comments that we've heard since, you know, the draft has been released, because I'm sure that we could address the comments raised here today. And then by the time we get to a public open house, there might be more comments from that council have seen. So depending on your appetite, we could either pause this to rework some of these policies or move forward and rework the policies concurrently as we go forward, because we're not talking about adopting this just yet.
Mr. Councilor?
I think the scary piece, sorry to be seeking time here to speak. I think Councillor Richardson, he just confirmed something you said, and I bet Councillor Trentowski was doing some napkin math there to figure it out, right? If that's the final complexion of what we're shooting for, then those numbers, given the current urban mix and residential density mix, the numbers that we're going to have to see to actually move us forward are going to be more extreme than that. Am I right, Councillor Trentowski? So I mean, there's some perhaps complex math that has to be done, and happy to have the consultant to do that. I'm not sure, though, that we should stall much longer on this. I think that it can come back to us as part of the revisions that come forward when council.
Fine with this being done concurrently.
Yeah, I think concurrent is right, yeah.
Councilor Duncan?
Just scrolling down a little further, I'm wondering if those numbers, like others have discussed, are probably suitable. I'm looking at residential use requirements, and it says a minimum density of 30 units per hectare be permitted within mixed-use development. Maybe that units per hectare is the number we're after. Like, I don't care if you build more single-family homes, but put them on 30-foot lots as opposed to 60-foot lots to get twice as many in and increase the density. I guess I'm not so hung up on whether you build apartment buildings or single-family homes. I just want to see more units on a smaller amount of property to make the use of our farmland that we're going to give up. So maybe that is maybe the units per hectare is the number that we're looking at more so than what we're building.
If I might, I think that's the right direction. And I think that direction has to be informed by the aspirations, the projections that came from the model, right? So the 52, 37, I think that when that is carefully applied and looked at, then the density numbers, like you suggested, will be apparent, right? Like what we need to strive for. Because I'll say this, and you know, Councilor Richardson has often asked the right question about, you know, can we get affordable today, essentially? And the challenge is that often we equate density with affordability. We think that there's a tight correlation. There is not. It's not that tightly correlated. And so, and that became very apparent to me in a discussion with a developer who opened their books and showed us what it costs to build the different. And we came to realize that apartments weren't all that attractive from a cost perspective, to sort of Councilor McDermott's concern. And that there are other forms still that are more attractive because of that. So that correlation between density and affordability is tenuous. There might be sort of a gentle hint in the spread of data, but I wouldn't call it a correlation, and rest my hat on it. And so I think that we need to think about density targets, and I personally think we need to hold our guns. It says shall be 20% with regards to affordability. And to me, that is a pretty big direction.
Deputy Warden Kelly?
Just one comment. So Matt said something about 5 minutes ago, if I'm following the bouncing ball. These numbers are for county-wide. So if we do adopt these and say us in North Perth, a developer comes and we say, no, we want more intensification, we can do that, and they cannot come back on us because we're saying we want to meet those targets. But in North Perth, we need these numbers and we're sticking to them. Is that correct?
Susanna?
Through you.
Oh, Matt. Okay, go ahead, Matt.
Through Warden, yes. So as mentioned, these policies and these guidelines and targets would be implemented through the zoning bylaw. And so the local council would be able to update the zoning bylaw to, if you like, establish a minimum density target, or sorry, a minimum density requirement. You could zone to specifically permit certain housing types to the exclusion of others, so that if you do want to achieve that higher density and higher level of intensification within your community, then you would be able to establish those zoning regulations to do so.
All we need to hear.
Just for my clarification, then, do you want this done before this document is viewed by the public, or as we go along? Like, to me, when this document goes out, this is what county council is saying, this is what we're recommending, right? So if you don't have everything correct or the way we want it, to me, it skews what we're telling the public. So just for clarification, how do you just want to do this?
I don't have a problem with the document going out as is right now. We could work on some of these things concurrently. Let's be honest. 98% of the population could look at that and they don't want to understand the density or intensity or whatever the word is. Like, it'll mean nothing to them. If there are other things that will mean more to them, then that portion of it. This would be the developers and et cetera, will be paying close attention to this.
Councilor Duncan?
After hearing some clarification, I'm okay with the document going out as it is. I think that we need to go back and look at the units per hectare, maybe more so through the comprehensive zoning bylaws at each lower tier, more so. Like we've discussed, like, these numbers are a big change from what's currently here. We're gonna have to take a bigger step this way to get to those numbers. So I'm okay with those numbers now that, you know, there's been some more explanation. So I'm okay with the document, like that part of the document anyways. I'm not sure if there's other things that other councilors want to discuss into this document yet that you know.
Okay, so is everybody good with what we've just done? I think Jim has a couple more,
So
let's move on.
more clarification, I guess. I was reading through there all the potential studies that might need to be done for development. I'm looking at all those going, I had to do every one of those studies. It cost me maybe 200,000 plus. But still having the potential of being declined. The first question would be, who makes the decision as to what studies have to be done? And what logic is that based on? And what's gonna happen if that person does do all those studies and say he gets voted down at a council meeting and can't proceed with it, even after he's done all this homework, done everything he's been asked to do, it still gets declined.
Dan?
Yeah,
Page.
I'm not sure what page that's on, all the studies, but next one I got found page. They're asking me what page, sorry.
what page, you like page number?
It does list all the studies on one of the pages in.
It's on page. Page 202, section 652, and 653. So I would say the overarching objective of land use planning generally, is to consider consider how a development proposal is going to fit into the existing community structure. And the planning department as a municipal agency, a municipal function, has a professional obligation in order to consider how will this specific development contribute to the social and environmental well-being of our community, as well as contributing to the general economy of the place. So it's a very high level, lofty ambition. And the intention of this document is to provide mapping, two pieces, the mapping together with the policies to be specific about if, developer Joe Smith wants to do X on property Y, here are the specifics with regards to what X looks like on this specific site. So it is complex. And when you pull apart a specific inquiry, the policies provide a pathway for identifying what those studies might be. At the planning department, our team has been in transition for the past couple of years, and we have a suite of tools and strategies that we have been implementing around training, around improving these documents, around consistency of pre-consultation processes at all the local municipalities, in consultation and coordination with the municipal staff as well as the other agencies in the community. And our intention is to be consistent. So these are important questions, and we take that responsibility very seriously.
Those same studies would apply to an agricultural expansion?
But the studies required for an agricultural expansion would be different than the studies required for an industrial development in a serviced urban area. And that is the job of the official plan, is to be able to identify what type of information we need from a specific developer so that the municipality, county council, or the local councils as the planning authority can evaluate whether this is going to be complementary for a community or whether it's going to identify any concerns. If the developer is about to invest significantly into our community, there might be opportunities for, perhaps active transportation systems, or ensuring that flooding doesn't happen on neighboring property owners. And the onus, county council has consistently identified that the onus of that the developer pays for the development questions. That has been the discussion to date.
Well, I've got a problem with that, but I'm just thinking, where agriculture is not a developer, it's the farmer. But let's be honest, if it's an individual family or a corporation, like most farms are corporations, And, I look at that and, okay, I want to put up addition onto my barn to house another 200 head of beef cattle. And what studies, and I don't think it's really defined in here, may apply to that versus more so an urban development or an industrial development or et cetera. That's my point.
It's a great point, and it's a great discussion point. So for a livestock expansion, the significant question is with regards to minimum distance separation requirements and how an expansion of a hog operation, for example, would impact the neighboring residential uses. So the requirement for an expansion of a hog operation would be to put their minds to, well, it would be to engage a nutrient management consultant and do the calculation and define, and then based on the type of livestock, the size of the operation, and the type and size of the manure storage, it's possible to determine what the range of odor would be from that hog operation.
Yeah, every farmer understands MDS, that's nothing new. It's like, I've had a couple phone up and said, geez, they want me to do this study and this study and this study now, put up a new barn. And I'm saying, well, you'll have to talk to your people in your area, that's my bailiwick.
So when we had the discussions, I asked that question. I asked that we have criteria set out, who has to do what studies when, and is that, do we have that? Like, I don't want, just because somebody can say, if you may ask for a study, then all those studies can be done. Like, there was supposed to have been criteria for each example, want to put up a barn or a subdivision or whatever. So do we have that criteria?
We do not have the, like, the one that we're working on immediately is the criteria for nitrate studies. So a nitrate study is, or a hydrogeological study, is the evaluation based on when a development is proposed on private septic system, what the septic plume would be, and the potential for influencing existing drilled wells or new private water supplies. So that is the tool that we are immediately working on.
Well, I think we need that criteria.
Now, if I can jump in, I just want to make sure I understand. I mean, this document shows a list of potential studies that may be requested. And I suspect that it falls on the judgment of the planner who gets the file as to which studies are called for in that council meeting. And I think what I'm trying to interpret and build on Councillor Richardson's question, but I think, there would be a lot more comfort if we sort of knew, okay, when it comes to an agricultural expansion that involves more livestock, then this is the usual list. And we know that the rest are optional, but could be called on depending on the circumstances of the application, right? And that there's some predictability to that. I think that's what we're kind of asking for, if I'm following both the warden's intent and Councillor Richardson's.
Predictability is a good word for that.
But looking for greater predictability. Now, we know, I think we have to own that every application is unique. I've heard that a little bit more than I'd care to lately. And therefore, there's some discretion on the part of the planner to address that. And they do have a list that they can pull from. Like, we kind of, at least we're moving forward, we're saying, here are all the things that could be on the list. But I do think that there's some wisdom, and I think it falls a little bit outside this document, but it would be good process and practice for us to sort of know, okay, here's the common scenarios that we encounter: an industrial on a green field, an industrial on a brown field, a farm with addition of livestock, and here's the usual studies or requests that planning would make. Almost a little bit algorithmic, yes. But I think that would be to the benefit of everyone, because, I think the biggest concern, and you see it in any regulated environment, is that you'll finish the one thing and another request will come in for another thing. And nobody likes that. Nobody likes that, regardless of what industry they work in or what their profession is. And so I think that's where the concern may lie, is that up front you want to be as conclusive as possible, as predictable as possible about what is going to be requested. So the people know that, 90% of the expectations are already on the table. And when we're talking to you in that pre-consult, we might flag one or two more because of the circumstances of the unique application. Am I kind of grabbing what people are thinking here?
So how do we get that changed?
Is it a change that's required, or is it that we know that the planning department will work on these checklists?
Again, another thing that can be done concurrently.
Yeah.
So through the word, we had engaged KPMG some time ago to look at the planning process on certain applications from start to finish, and including other agencies such as MPAC and the registry office. So a lot of that work, and it is done concurrently as we develop and bring back the planning to the upper tier, a lot of that was done. It is the intention that once the OP is done and we have packages, you come in just like you would in other types of industry where you sit down with the planner and say, I want to do this. And we're able to hand you a complete portfolio to say, oh, welcome, this is exactly what you need. And these things are the standard. And depending on the uniqueness of your situation, we may also ask for these types of things. And then through the half funding that municipalities have applied for, we are hoping to get some of these studies paid for by either the local municipalities with the upper tier being able to administer some of it, those projects, for example, the archaeological study. So sure, it's going to be on there, but if we are able to do that with half funding, we will already have that study done across the county. So the idea of the consistency and the predictability, absolutely, that is a goal, and that's one that's been talked about for us to launch once we have a new official plan. So there has been work done on it, but not across the board that we can lay on the table for you. We're not there yet.
Alexander would like to comment.
Thank you, Warden. So the list of studies that may be required is essentially a compendium of all of the studies that are mentioned throughout the policies of the official plan. So for just about, I think, or at least it should be, anything that's listed there, you should be able to find direction in policies elsewhere in the official plan that say when it would be required. And the process that the county planners or the local planners would follow is, and developers for that matter, is you begin by locating the property on the official plan schedules and identifying any of the features that are adjacent to that property or on that property, and then work through the official plan essentially and say, you know, if there's a natural environment feature, then that's going to trigger an ecological site assessment or an environmental impact study. If it is, let's say, a barn expansion, then, as Susanna mentioned, the MDS studies. And there are qualifying policies there, or at least there's a fairly common type of interpretation that happens where, for instance, if for natural environment features that are located more than 120 meters from the location where you want to develop something, you would identify that, but you wouldn't have to go through that detailed study. And that's essentially laid out in the official plan policies. But one of the key pieces of process outlined in the official plan is the pre-consultation application process, where an applicant or a prospective applicant will come to the planning staff with an idea. It might not be very detailed. They might just say, I own this property and I'd like to build a house here. What do I need to do? And staff will go through the official plan policies and let them know what it looks like they will need to do. Again, it's a very process-oriented or a process-related process. So if staff identify more than what they would like to do, or if they disagree with that interpretation, then there is an appeal process. An applicant would submit their application. If they leave off, let's say, an agricultural impact assessment, they would have to justify why they've left that off, why they feel that it's not necessary. And if staff disagree, then they would neglect to deem that application complete. And if that continues a conflict, then the applicant could take that to the Ontario Land Tribunal. But if everybody's on the same page, then it would proceed through the review process. So I would say that those the predictability is embedded in the official plan. We have general policies about development according to those land use designations and those general policies related to different types of uses. But for the most part, either applicants are coming with their own consultants who are familiar with these things and have an understanding of how to interpret the policy, or maybe they're less experienced, but planning staff at the county are there to help with the interpretation. And I think we've done a pretty good job of providing clarity in those policies. I guess maybe the misunderstanding or the when you look at the list at the end of the official plan, it seems like it's kind of arbitrary, like, oh yeah, they might include that, they might require that, but it is embedded in the policies earlier in the plan.
When you're the builder and you have all them studies to do, it's pretty daunting and pretty expensive. And if we're gonna keep making more red tape for people, they're not gonna build. Yeah. End of story. I'm at my stage in life where my husband wanted to build a big barn, I tell him to go fly a kite. I don't want to do all the studies. So, and that's me that would have to do them. Anyway, I don't want to make it more onerous for our taxpayers, but I think that's what we do. Councilor Aitchison?
I hate to bore everybody any further, but I got another question.
That's okay.
I can see it in people's eyes, they're getting tired of me asking questions. However, this is the chance. So I want to go back, give me a page this time, boys, page 73. And I'm talking about secondary farm occupations. And the one thing on there, and I said before, people understand the MDS quite well in the rural area. But in here, it says, for the most part, under secondary farm occupations, MDS is not an issue. Then it also says just a little further down that if you're going to have some urban type customers come and do retail at your secondary farm occupation, then the MDS would be applicable. And I'm thinking, I'm going to go back to the OPA we had last county council meeting. We had a young couple that wanted to set up, or were working across from their parents' farm. And he was doing mechanical work, and which was one secondary farm occupation. She wanted to do a flower shop in the same building, which I thought was a great idea, because you're not taking up any more land base and you're giving that person an opportunity to have a business. But if she had to meet MDS, that would never go. And I guess my point is, like, I'm going to use, like, say, Stonetown Cheese, south of the same areas, who do a lot. So they make the cheese there. That cheese shop is like, where they make the cheese is only less than 100 feet from where all the cattle are. But they use the existing driveway. And I guess if people didn't want to smell the smell of the farm, they wouldn't show up to buy cheese. But my point is, I think that is overkill to need MDS on the secondary farm occupation that may have some retail avenue. Let's be honest, that's the whole idea of a secondary farm occupation, is to sell things and make some money to make your farm more financially feasible. And the one part I did like about reading through here, and I did have some discussion with the manager of planning, we did that OPA last meeting, and I said, that's overkill. I said, you've got a young couple that wants to set up shop in your area and stay here. So if we want to retain our youth, why are we sending them off to hire a planner at all the costs of an OPA to set up a flower shop? She'll never get her money out of that in her first year, come heck or high water. But we have addressed that in here. You can do that through your zoning bylaws, which I think is great. So if, say, North Perth didn't want that flower shop to go through, they could vote it down in their zoning bylaw. But in Perth South or Perth East, we may say, yeah, we want that. You know what I'm saying? So just clarification why, if there was more retail sales, they'd have to meet MDS. Can't say I haven't read this.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So the minimum distance separation requirement is an OMAFRA tool that has been in place for some time in order to protect agricultural uses.
I understand that completely. That's nothing new.
Yeah.
But we're talking a secondary farm occupation.
Yeah. So the rationale for this policy then is that there may be more complaints with regards to retail use in the agricultural area to a use that, you know.
My point is.
Like grain storage or something like that.
They don't go there to shop.
Yeah, this policy would be in council's jurisdiction. Like if council would like to revise this policy, we're open to receiving comments.
I kind of think we're throwing a possible restriction in that's going to discourage a secondary farm occupation. My opinion.
Okay, anyone else want to comment on that?
Can we remove it then?
Can we remove it? Yes, we can. That's what council wishes. We can remove that.
I'd make that motion or whatever.
We need motions, George.
If you're gonna be removing a policy, a piece of the policy, or best to take.
I did look at other areas of official plans for secondary farm occupations. There was never one word of MDS mentioned in those. It was just, they want a secondary farm occupation. Great, we're happy.
Okay, so you want to make that a motion that we remove that? Do we have a seconder? Mr. Aitchison, any more comments, questions on that? All in favor? Carried.
And I promise I'm going to be quiet now.
Really?
Temporarily.
You've done well.
Well, this is the time to make this right. And we spent hours and hours and hours, as Councilor Kassenberg said, on the phone or Zoom and whatever, and like, damn it, I want to do this right.
Yeah, we do.
I don't want to do it twice, I want to do it once, and I want to do it right the first time.
Okay, anyone else with questions, comments? Councilor Trinkowski?
One question through you, Warden. 3.53 general agricultural policies that starts on page 70 and section H is on page 71. Ground mounted renewable energy infrastructure and equipment are permitted only as on-farm diversified uses. What does that clause mean?
Secondary farm business, I guess.
Through you, Warden. So that means that an agricultural lot would not be, or let's say ground solar panels. Let's say a proposal to use an agricultural property for only solar panels would not be permitted, but it would be permitted if it was secondary use to an agricultural use.
Well, I'll rephrase the question, Warden, if I could. So if a company proposed a 50 wind turbine development in an area of the county, would that be acceptable under the official plan as it's written right now?
I'm not sure if the definition of ground-mounted renewable energy infrastructure and equipment would apply to a wind turbine. I'm not sure.
Oh, that base is part of the ground, no different than a solar panel.
Well, yes, but I'm not aware of any renewable energy component that isn't attached to the ground in some way. So that's why I'm unsure if I'm unsure about the definition on that.
Can that be clarified then for us?
Yes, I think it should be, yeah.
Yeah, because wind turbines are starting to come around again, and
As well as the battery storage facility proposals. This was before my tenure on county council, but previous county council members will recall a delegation made by Mr. Warren Howard on setbacks for turbines at that time, so. that's why that's partly why I bring the question up. I don't see anything here referring to setbacks. And I don't see anything, and I saw clause H and I wanted to get clarification if that meant turbines. Wind turbines are items that an individual property owner would use to power their own property, or does that also include turbines and other such instruments that are used to provide power into the provincial power grid? So.
Anybody want to answer that or know the answer? Can something be put in showing that?
Does it work for us to flag it and answer it through the process?
This is another current discussion.
Okay, anything else anyone else wants to bring up? No? Okay, so we've had a great discussion on different things. So we have a motion that council receives the draft new Perth County official plan report and that council directs staff to proceed with the circulation and public consultation for the draft new Perth County official plan. We have a mover and a seconder, moved by Councillor Castleberg, second by Councillor Duncan. Any more comments, questions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Thank you, Suzanne. Susanna. So, okay, we're going to move on. Council reports. Are there any reports from anybody? Oh, okay. No bylaws. Do we have any notice of motions? Any other business? Any announcements? I know Lori had one, not here. So I'll make mine first. Just want to, on behalf of council, we want to thank staff. We want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to politically correct to say that word, but I did, because that's what I do. But anyway, we hope everybody.
Happy holiday season.
Yeah, hope you have a great season. Hope you enjoy the holidays with your families. So thank you for all that you do. Where Lori is. When I need her. Was up there.
We'll continue on, move it to close.
Okay, well, we do have need for a closed session. So we have a motion that Perth County Council move into closed session at approximately 12:01. In accordance with section 239 of the Municipal Act as amended to consider a matter pertaining to negotiations, a facility verbal update, and a matter pertaining to negotiations, a facility verbal update. So moved by Councillor Smith, second by Deputy Warden Kellum. All in favor? Carried. Okay, so we're back. We're going to announcements now. Lori?
Well, thank you. Through the warden, it's always my pleasure at this time of year to express appreciation on behalf of the staff to County Council for the support that you've given us over the past year. We've accomplished, on your direction, a number of significant projects and advancement on other projects that have been underway, both starting this year and, as we have seen earlier in the meeting, that have been going on for quite a few years. So just on behalf of the staff, thank you very, very much. And we wish you all the best in the new year.
Okay, good. Thank you. So we do have bylaw 3957-2023, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council of the Corporation of the County of Perth at its regular meeting held December 21st, 2023 is read a first, second, third time and passed December 21, 2023. Moved by Councillor McDermott, second by Councillor McKenzie. All in favor? Carried. And the last motion of the morning is the council be adjourned at 12:14. Moved by Councillor Orr, second by Councillor Castleberg. All in favor? Carried. Great. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the holidays. Bye.